Racism is the act of being prejudiced towards other races. Even though slavery was abolished, there were still issues in the African American society. African American life was still harsh and people still viewed African Americans differently, especially Caucasians. The KKK was reformed in 1915 by William Simmons, and their main goal was to take African American rights away. The leader was David C. Stephens, and the organization reached over 4,100 members. Soon the KKK became hostile not only with African Americans, but with anybody who had been considered a foreigner, such as Jews, Roman Catholics, socialists, and communists. The KKK often punished people by performing the acts of lynching, and most of the time, those people were innocent. Jim Crow laws took a huge toll on African American life. It basically controlled almost every aspect of their lives, from public transportation, healthcare, housing, and the use of public facilities, which lasted between 1805 and 1907. African American children did not have the best education. They would have to sit in a small room with one teacher who taught all grades and all ages. African American women, or any woman, did not really work in this time period. If they did have a job, it would be sewing or somewhere in the clothing, knitting and sewing industries. African American men did not have the best jobs or did not get paid the highest wages. They worked for at least 10 to 16 hours a day and got paid about $6. They mostly worked in factories. They were farming assistants, and they lived in small, very, very small cottage houses beside the farmer or owner's house. They worked in meat packing plantations, and they worked as coal miners. After the California Gold Rush, when freedmen moved away from the South to the West, African American men also became cowboys, and they would herd cattle. Theodore Roosevelt believed that racism was wrong. He viewed everyone basically the same in his own eyes, believed everyone was equal. He was a great president during this time period. He had a lot of accomplishments. He was very brave, and he reformed America a lot. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to invite Booker T. Washington, former slave, to have dinner with him in the White House. W.E.B. Du Bois was a professor at Atlanta University, and he was the first African American to receive a PhD in the subject of history from Harvard University. He believed the only effective strategy against racism was agitation. He formed the NAACP, which was a group of 60 white and black activists who had been shocked by a race riot that exploded in Springfield, Illinois. The NAACP's goal was to fight for integration against discrimination in all areas of American life. They raised public awareness of the brutal treatment of lynching. They wanted to end discrimination in housing, education, employment, voting, and transportation. The NAACP planned to attack segregation in federal courts and won several major victories. In 1905, W.E.B. Du Bois also formed the Niagara Movement. They crossed over to the Canadian side where they were welcomed and received rooms with incident. This group issued a manifesto that demanded the rights of black people to vote, not to be segregated in public transportation and be discriminated elsewhere, and to enjoy all those liberties white citizens enjoyed. But the Niagara Movement shortly ended in 1911. African American men already had the right to vote, but they also supported women's suffrage, the women's right to vote. And they eventually got the right to vote in the year 1918. They paraded up and down, the streets, especially around the White House, when President Wilson was there. African Americans eventually got all their rights. It was not in the time of reform. It was much, much later. But former civil rights leader Martin Luther King ended segregation in the civil rights movement. Thank you guys for watching. The end.